Okay, we're back with Grazel, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about why someone wouldn't want to do couples therapy, because as we know, Grazel specializes in couples therapy. Um, but I imagine, Grazel, you've had a few people come to you who are potentially being dragged by their partner or just feeling a bit reluctant about coming. So why would they not want to come?
First, I want to validate that it is hard to go to therapy in general, right? Especially if it's your first time. So I want to validate the fear that comes. That I think it's normal to be resistant at first. Um, and if they continue to be resistant, even after they've tried therapy, then I'm sure there's so much more going on that we all don't know about until we learn what the blocks are in therapy. But most of the time, the reasons for not going to therapy could be that they've had a bad experience with the previous therapists, that they're afraid of going deeper into the issues that they don't really want to look into, right? And sometimes, if it's a couple, sometimes one of the partners is usually out the door. They're not wanting to work on the relationship. And that can be the reason why. Um, and at times it's finances, time, commitment. Um, Usually it's hard for parents to go to couples therapy because they don't have babysitters. So there's some factors that are not that deep that play into the resistance, but there are also emotional factors that play in.
Yeah, absolutely. And when when you're in that situation and you've got a couple in the room and one of them is quite hesitant to be there, reluctant to be there, do you sort of address that in the first session?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think it's so important to address what's causing them to not want to be in therapy right off the bat. Um, to just kind of see if couples therapy is even going to be a fit for them,
Yeah.
right? Because usually clients are coming to us because they need help and they don't know whether couples therapy is going to help, right? So I think it's important to talk about the reluctance and the resistance right off the bat, if it shows up.
Yeah. And then when it does, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago how sometimes they're reluctant to come because they don't want to talk about a particular thing. Maybe they've got a fear about talking about it, or there's this hesitation, and it's like I don't want to go there. Are there any kind of commonalities around what that thing can typically be? Is it typically trauma related, or can it be something else?
It could be so for couples, sometimes when there is a withdrawn partner, they're afraid to open up for fear of not feeling understood or being rejected or criticized again. So they are afraid that it's going to happen in therapy too. But sometimes they are open to doing it in therapy because there's another person that can keep a place a little bit safer for them. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And
But
if oh,
yeah, but the reluctance usually is, I mean, it is scary to be vulnerable. So if they've been vulnerable before and they haven't been received, it's hard to get that person to open back up.
mhm.
And usually that can show up in resistance and reluctance to be in therapy.
How do you help people overcome that?
I think going to individual therapy first, so they're not that feeling that exposed to another person in couples therapy. But also there's trauma that blocks someone from, you know, getting the help they need.
Okay. Um, what would you say the biggest myth about couples therapy is? At least the one that you typically encounter, and you're always saying, no, that's completely wrong.
Say that again.
What's the biggest myth about couples therapy? Do you find yourself constantly telling people, no, you've got it wrong, that's not how it works?
Myth about couples therapy. There's usually a myth about individual therapy. I'm trying to think if there's a myth about couples therapy. I think maybe if I don't hear it much, but maybe I'm trying to think if oh, okay. Perhaps we're gonna fight more,
Mm.
or that's a myth. We're gonna fight more. You you've already been fighting before you come to therapy. So if you fight more, then maybe the couples therapist is not able to help you, but it's not couples therapy that's making you fight more. It could be that it's not a good match. It could be that the couples therapist doesn't have the expertise that you're needing.
Mhm.
Also, that maybe the therapist will side with one partner and I will be left alone and no one will understand me. That's a myth. However, can it happen? Absolutely. It can happen when a couples therapist have their own personal countertransference that's coming up in the session and they're over identifying or siding with one partner. And that's not the couple's issue. That's the therapist's issue that they need to work on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I always think it's interesting to see what's in like the cultural zeitgeist and what's coming out in the media. I saw a skit a while ago. It was like a couple going to couples therapy, and the therapist was basically completely invalidating the guy because he was trying to get with the girl, basically. And obviously, that's a completely blown out example, and that, or I hope, never happens. But if that's in the cultural zeitgeist, there's going to be a little kernel of truth in that, in that the therapist, as you say, sides with one person, or um, that's what the public might think deep down. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So yeah, I think that's absolutely a really common myth because people don't realize the level of training therapists go through to actually get to that place of being completely impartial. And I know you and your team have got pretty extensive training.
Right. No, it's a great point. I think a lot of people outside of the therapy world really don't know what it takes for us to be able to meet every client, every client's needs, especially for couples therapy. I mean, I want to give, the public information about therapists were usually there to the best interest of you. That's what we're trained to do, is to help and to make sure that we're giving you what you need, we're helping you feel better. But at times, the clients also bring their own transference that can pull the therapist to act a certain way that maybe the therapist is not aware of yet. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the therapist is doing that intentionally. It's part of a relational dynamic that's part of human interaction, right? There's transference and there's countertransference. That's so important. And a lot of people don't know what a transference is. If a patient brings that into the room, the therapist is just human too, and they're going to have a certain feeling that they're not trying to intentionally do to harm you. That's why it's so important for a client to share what they're thinking and how they're being treated by a therapist to give the relationship an opportunity to repair. And that's where the work is. And I think most people, once they feel that the therapist is having a personal um, experience in the therapy room, they leave.
Mm.
Give yourself an opportunity to repair it with a therapist. And if that therapist is not able to repair it with you, then you know that the therapist is not right for you.
I can imagine that's incredibly valuable for the therapist because we've all got our blind spots about what's going on with us, and if you've got a client coming to you and saying, "Hey, I feel like this is going on for you. That's making me feel really weird," and it forces the therapist to take a look at themselves in a way that maybe they haven't before, or they just bring to their awareness stuff they haven't been aware of, which then they can go to their own therapy because that's what therapists typically do, and they can work on it themselves, and it helps them grow. Um,
Yes. Absolutely. So for your question, what if one client comes in feeling like the therapist is going to be siding with my partner? If they have that fear, I encourage them to talk about it right away. And if it's coming up in the session, I encourage them to talk about it. It's like, hey, I feel like you're siding with my partner more. And the therapist can talk to you about it. And I hope that the therapist can be welcoming of that and say, oh, I'm so sorry that that makes you feel that way. I'd like to know what I did as your couples therapist to make you feel like I'm siding with your partner. Can we talk about that? Because I don't want you to think that I am, because your experience matters to me too, right? That's an important repair.
Yeah, and that's the thing with therapy is it's an ongoing relationship. It takes quite a lot of time to make that significant progress. So if you're just canning it every third or fourth session and going to a new therapist because the same issue keeps coming up and you're refusing to address it, it's not helping you as the client either.
No, no.
So do you have any examples of people coming to therapy and it really truly changing their life? Maybe they were reluctant to come and then they have this complete transformation because I hear these stories
Oh,
all the time.
yes, absolutely. Especially when therapy is looked at as a bad thing. In certain cultures, therapy is not important. Uh, Talking about your issues to a stranger, even they're a professional, is stigmatized. It's no, who needs that? There are certain cultures that believe that to be true. So if that person coming from that culture breaks through that belief and goes to therapy and they see a lot of changes happening for them, it's a tremendous help. It's very beneficial to them. Yes, absolutely. I've seen that happen.
You can you can sort of get chained by your upbringing and then going to therapy. It's like you just take it away one chain at a time, and then suddenly you just feel free. That's,
Yes, right, right.
okay, so if someone is in that situation and their partner's saying to come to couples therapy, they're kind of reluctant, they're on the fence, they're thinking, I don't really want to go. How can they tell the difference between that being a real gut feeling of, no, this feels wrong, I definitely don't want to be there, and rather than, I'm just a bit resistant because of this reason? How can you tell the difference between the two there?
I think you have to really understand who the person is that's resisting couples therapy, perhaps having an individual therapy session with them to aid the couples treatment, to get a feel of where that resistance is coming from in a safer space where you can figure out, is this is this a part of their cycle where the other partner is just going for the sake of going? And what is their gut saying? Or if they're not people pleasing and if it's not part of the cycle, would their gut tell them to not go to therapy, and why? Is it because they're leaning out of the relationship? Is it because they've lost love and commitment to the relationship and they're just doing it because they're afraid to hurt their partner? There's so many reasons why.
Yeah. And if someone leaning out is very, very different to someone feeling like they've lost the love, because I don't know, I feel like the definition of love is very strange in the Western world today because we view it as a feeling, but feelings change on an hourly basis.
Yeah. Right, right.
That love is a set of behaviors. It's you treat someone a certain way. That's how you love in
Yes.
the core sense of the word. So people saying, "Oh, I've lost the love." No, you haven't. You stopped treating them in the way you should.
Right. And that's a really great point. It's so important to know, like, is your leaning out behavior part of the cycle?
Hmm.
Is it because it's easy for you to think about, I should just leave this relationship because it provides soothing to think about it, but doesn't necessarily mean you don't love your partner. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not committing to making it work. Sometimes, the thoughts of, oh, I wish this was over. is relieving. And it doesn't necessarily mean you want to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, thank you so much again for your time. That was a really interesting conversation as always. I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Scott.